Now, before I turn it over for a Q&A, I just want to, because it's moderator's prerogative, just to ask a couple of questions myself. First of all, to the professor, you mentioned a permanent mechanism, an international mechanism, and Regina obviously just mentioned something akin to the IIIM for Syria or the IIM for Myanmar. How likely is that, and what would be the process by which we get there?
Thank you very much for this question. It's an important question on this important occasion. I think we need to propagate. It's very important to have accountability and rule of law. The question is, for example, if you want to establish a mechanism of this sort, you would have to work with member states, including and in particular member states of the Human Rights Council. And then the issue is how much initiatives these member states have, how much are they willing to support the establishment of such a tribunal. I'm here to support this cause, and I would encourage you and all members of the panel and the audience here to support me, to seek justice and accountability. And as you would remember, that I have consistently recommended that the Human Rights Council establishes a mechanism of international accountability, be it in the form of a commission or an inquiry or whatever form. But we must not allow the perpetrators of these serious human rights violations to escape justice. And that is the key to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Let me turn to Regina now, because it's just to stay on the same subject. For those of you who don't know, the IIIM and the IIIM, they're essentially documenting mechanisms which have a mandate to collect evidence and then feed it into national trial processes or international trial processes. But, you know, there's a certain frustration about those mechanisms because, in a sense, they're quite passive. They collect evidence, but largely the public doesn't know what's happening. Would you want to replicate those types of mechanisms, or would you like to change the mechanisms? What would you see as the most effective mechanism for Iran?
I think the most effective mechanism would be an independent tribunal, but I do not think that that's politically realistic given the composition of some of the parties that are in the United Nations and some of the alliances that are there. But an independent mechanism like the one for Myanmar, the good thing about that is wherever the perpetrators go, that mechanism works with civil society to capture and to make sure that we have credible evidence. So I believe the Nuri case is a great example, the one from Sweden. In that case, had there been a mechanism, perhaps there would have been a lot more things that it could have focused on besides what he was charged. We only had a certain amount of evidence, and a lot of it is also in terms of what you all are gathering, civil society gathers. I'm not really sure if there is a consistent standard. So the mechanism allows that to happen, and I think it can very much help in achieving justice.
Thank you. Okay, I'll turn to you, MEP Ivan. You mentioned raising the issue of sanctions. And you sort of suggest that there's some sort of pushback. Could you explain the process which you go through to try to push for sanctions in relation to a situation such as Iran, and what the pushback might be and how you might overcome those obstacles?
I would say more than a pushback, the member states are not acting fast enough. And here comes the responsibility also from the European Parliament to push the member state to take their responsibility immediately, not in 1 week, not in 2 weeks, but immediately, because it is now when the people in Iran are being oppressed even more than they usually are being done. It's now where the women, girls, men, elderly are on the streets. It's now we need to show our solidarity in both words, through manifestation, demonstrations, but more than that, by actions, through using our toolbox as, for example, the sanction mechanism, and sanction those people that are behind the oppression that the people are facing today. However, I just wanted to actually, if it's okay, to touch up on the previous question also. In the European Parliament in May 2020, I was actually a part of negotiating to adopt the new rules which allows the European Union agency, Eurojust, criminal justice cooperation, to prevent evidence for war crimes. These new rules will allow this agency, Eurojust, to process, analyze, and share this evidence to facilitate, of course, justice and end impunity. So from the side of the European Union, also the last month, it has primarily been related to Ukraine, but it is not only a tool to be used in one conflict, it's also, in one situation, but also in other situations also. So this is also, I think, important for the European Union to use its already existing tools, but in a better way than we do today. So I wouldn't say that there are any obstacles in that way, but the countries for now hasn't acted fast enough.
Thank you. And let me pick up on the Eurojust point. So how would it work? Would it work as a IIIM, or would it work in a different way?
So more or less, so it's to collect, to process and analyze, and then share the evidence with the countries it concerns, to ensure that the prosecutions or that they can prosecute people in a thorough way, and that they have enough evidence to ensure also conviction. Especially in those cases that we already know that there has been they have been behind war crimes or genocides, then we need to ensure that there also is enough evidence that points or could be used against those people or that person.
Okay, thank you. Now, before I turn it over to everyone for questions, I have to, of course, turn to Baroness and her challenge. The panel made various recommendations, including that the Islamic Republic of Iran conduct independent, impartial, transparent investigations, release all those held in arbitrary detention, and so on. And we made recommendations that the international community should urge the government of Iran to do that, to pursue universal jurisdiction, to refer the situation to the International Criminal Court, targeted sanctions. Baroness, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you did say that we didn't go far enough. So would you like to elaborate on that?
So I'll just, sorry, and it's not any criticism.
No, it's fine to be critical.
I really want to say that I really appreciate that the fact we've got some recommendations. But what I want to be able to do is to look at the recommendations and see how we strengthen them. Mm-hmm. How do you expect a regime you're asking to actually investigate themselves? How do you expect them to be the ones that are going to say, let's go and see what it is we're doing wrong, without an independent body overseeing what's being done internally? So we're waiting for somebody to police, investigate, and then tell us what they've done. And I can't see that happening unless there is a very strong, independent body involved in making sure that the questions being asked, the way it's being delivered, the outcomes that are being expected are all being able to be verified by somebody other than the regime itself. Now, I know that this is a big ask, but if we had faith in the process, maybe it would be different. But this is now 2022. We're following on from something that happened in 2019, and previous to that, and previous to that. So we've got to be able to be confident that actually the recommendations, and believe me, they are there for us to be able to work around. But I would really, really recommend that the biggest instrument that we need at this moment in time is that independent body that will be able to actually verify what is taking place. And unless that happens, I don't think anyone sitting here will believe anything coming out of Iran. And that is great sadness, because the people of Iran don't deserve that. They don't deserve not to have change. My colleague from the European Union is saying we need to respond quickly. Of course we do, but we've been trying to respond quickly for decades. And the sadness is that we respond not in a unified way. And until we actually collectively as an international community come together, whether it's Burma or Iran or other states, we will not be able to change the needle on the dial quick enough. And that is my concern.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions. I think now is a great opportunity to speak to some real experts. The lady there, please.
Hello, and good morning to everyone. Thank you to the panel. I want to show my respect and gratitude to your partaking in this situation and the tribunal. I just have a question. In the world that we're living in, it has been allowed for Gaza to exist as the largest prison camp in the world. Afghanistan is in ruins after US and UK abandoned it into the hands of Taliban. For 44 years, my people have been under devastation and scrutiny through their own government, a government that was helped to exist through the help of Europeans. How do I trust that today's judgment is actually going to make a difference to my people in Iran when they are in front of bullets right now? It's been 14 days of revolution in motion. Every day people are getting kidnapped, not arrested, kidnapped by the authorities. How is today's movement going to make a difference in Iran today? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'll just take a couple more questions and then turn all of the questions over to the panel. Lady there, please.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today and for...
Sorry, could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Natalie Turjubi and I'm from Cyprus. I would like to comment, insert some question following the words of the member of the European Parliament, Mrs. Insir, where she said, silence is compliance, it's time for action, and we do not, and that they need to know we see them and we do not remain silent. You mentioned a lot of ethnicities, and if I'm not mistaken, you have not mentioned Cypriots, where the half of the country is under the illegal occupation, military occupation of Turkey. And I want to remind you that Cyprus is a member of the EU, so since 2004, and the occupation is from 1974. And I want to say, how do you expect the Iranian government to follow the rule of law and the recommendations from EU when EU itself cannot sort out the violation of international law in the EU? And a lot of people saying, so why speak about crimes committed in 1974? Why speak about my family that is forced displaced since today? Because we, the international community, the regional community, the civil society, we reform international law. We reform what is acceptable and what is not. So please, we have to be, as the last speaker said, Mrs. Baroness Santin Verma, that justice has to be for all. Justice has to be for all the crimes. Accountability has to be for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hello, and thank you so much for being here and for all your work and your efforts. My name is Shiva Mahboubi, and I'm from the Campaign to Free Political Prisoners in Iran. And my specific question is actually regarding the detainees. As we see that they use the same method that they used in November 2019 and they use it now, And what we observed, besides shooting the protesters, one of the main things they use is detaining not just the protesters, actually the former political prisoners, the right activists, and specifically the university students. And families do not know where they are. They don't know if their loved one is dead or alive. And obviously regime is not responding at all. So we try to compile a list of the detainees, but while I know that writing letters, reports, condemnation are extremely important, but sadly they're not enough anymore. And it's kind of been normalized. At the same time, I understand that working toward the ultimate goal of establishment of investigative mechanism is important. But what we need, what do we do now? And my question to you is, which I'm sure the question of many people in Iran and the families of political prisoners, what could you advise, what could you do in your power to force, and I'm using the word force, not negotiate with the regime, to force the regime to release all the detainees. And this is extremely important, because if we be able to do that, then we kind of put that pressure on the regime not to arrest furthermore. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, one more question, then I'll ask the panel.
Thank you. I also want to thank everyone, and also for this historical tribunal and its finding and judgment, which is quite important, and I hope it will be taken on as if discussed in here. My name is Saeed Khalil-Rad, and I'm a psychotherapist and an activist towards politics in Iran. My question is, it was a unanimous agreement that we need an international support in order to force the Iranian regime to stop their crime against humanity, which has been going on for 43 years. Not Aban Tribunal, and right now on the streets. So if we need international support, my first question is to Baroness Varma. Why Conservative Party and its leader, Liz Truss, has been definitely quiet, silent, intentionally silent, because it's been everywhere on the news, media, newspapers, radio. This time it's been publicized by Conservative Party in the UK has been definitely silent. Why? And from Mr. Rahman, Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Guterres, his comments was not even a slap on the wrist of the Islamic regime. It was a friendly comment. It's as if saying that, come on, stop it so we don't have to go against you. What can we do that UN finally stops for its principle and stand up, at least in Iran, to Islamic regime and not overriding the visa requirement and insisting that Raisi has to come to UN. Raisi's name was here, mentioned as one of those ones. It's well known, documented, that President of Iran has committed crime, ordered to kill thousands of people. But UN and Secretary General insist that he has to be present. Why? And the last question to Ms. Regina, what can we do in an international level to make these governments and states responsible to not just acknowledge, but take steps? And that independent panel and tribunal that you said, it's very difficult. Are there any way to work around it so that independent tribunal can finally be established? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think let's get some answers first, and then we'll turn to some more questions. There'll be time for more. The first question, I think, or the first two questions, are to a certain degree about selectivity, about the role of the UK and the US in Afghanistan, and how, notwithstanding, we can push for the rule of law. And I think a similar sort of question about, but with reference to Cyprus. So let me turn first to the professor and then to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there were very important questions, very searching questions about how international law and international human rights law needs to operate in an objective, fair, and transparent manner. Let me just mention to you that I am the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And my focus, certainly in this context, is to ensure justice and accountability for those who have suffered very serious violations of human rights. And my frame of reference is international law, international human rights law, the mechanisms that we have, and also to international humanitarian law mechanisms. And this is all within the framework of the United Nations. So I am very determined to seek justice, to seek accountability, talk to relevant mechanisms. I am willing and committed to speaking to member states within the Human Rights Council and outside of it, how effectively we can ensure this issue of justice and accountability. And I'm very happy to talk to each one of you and to member states as well to see what can be done further. Now, if you look at my previous recommendations in the reports, in my previous 2 reports, I have asked the international community to establish effective mechanisms for ensuring accountability for the November 2019 protests and for the 1988 massacres. And there are many other instances where the cases are not closed, justice needs to be done. Again, I emphasize that we must work collectively. We have to work within the UN system. And herein I respond to your question that it is a challenging environment that the United Nations work as a political body. It is a diplomatic endeavor. And within that diplomatic endeavor, we have to persuade the international community to ensure that justice and accountability is done. And if I can just make one further comment on how effectively we can have accountability achieved. One avenue is what we have seen, and I think panel members have mentioned, the Nouri case, the universal jurisdiction, the use of universal jurisdiction. So what I will say to you is that those people those individuals who have committed gross and serious violations of human rights should have no space to escape justice. And therefore, we should make more use of universal jurisdiction. Individual states can initiate proceedings against individuals who have committed these gross atrocities and therefore bring them to trial and bring them to justice. And I will stop here. Thank you.
And MEP Insir, Cyprus.
Yes. Thank you for the questions and your thoughts and interventions. I'm not here as the representative of the European Union. I'm here as a member of the European Parliament from the Socialists and Democrats, also representing Sweden, my own party, the Social Democratic Party of Sweden, which means that I have the same criticism as many of you in here, that it's very little that is being done, and I would not say that things has been done quickly. It hasn't been done quickly enough. This is the problem. I mean, if it would have things have been done and quickly enough, we wouldn't have seen the year after year oppression that is taking place in Iran right now, or Afghanistan, or any other part of the world. The problem is that we haven't done enough, and we haven't done it quickly enough. And then the question about Cyprus, and it's a very important question. I mean, I mentioned some places, but of course I didn't mention, because it will be a long list of countries to mention where there is oppression taking place or occupation taking place. And Cyprus is rightly a country, a part of the European Union, where the north part of Cyprus is occupied by Turkey. And trust me, I work quite a lot within the European Parliament on the Cyprus issue, and also the violations of Greek territories by Turkey. I have myself, for example, by the Turkish government, been pointed out, or by Turkish media close to the Turkish government, being pointed out as a person who allegedly been up on the mountain and fought against Turkey and been sent to the European Parliament to go some errands. by different actors. So that I didn't mention Cyprus in this context, it doesn't mean that I'm not fighting the Cyprus struggle also within the parliament, rather opposite. And then how is it, if change will come today with everything that is happening, it all depends on our actions. It depends on the actions of the European Union, it depends on the actions of the international community, and as I said, I think there is quite a lot more that we need to do. Start with the sanctions. It's not hard, as the panelists before me mentioned. It is quite. I mean, we should start targeting those that are behind the murder of Gina Amini and all other women, and people and organizations, companies that are behind oppression that are taking place in Iran, in Afghanistan, and other places. I'm proud actually over the new mechanism in the European Union, which was put in place last year, 2021, 1st of January, but I don't think that we have used it in the way that we actually can use in the benefit of people in Iran, in Afghanistan, in Cyprus, and all other places.
Can I just pick up on that?
Yeah.
How is it being used, and what's the problem?
I mean, it has been used in case of China, it has been used in case of Myanmar, for example. So I shouldn't say that it has never been used, but I think like for the concrete examples of Iran, why does it take so long time for us to put a place or to use a mechanism that we put in place in order for the sanctions to go faster than they were usually or it usually was taken, and I mean, many times previously, some countries were constituting obstacles, but with the new mechanism, it becomes easier to target specific people, specific companies, rather than with the broad sanctions. So yes, it has been used in some cases, but not enough, I would say, especially not in the case of Iran.
Thank you. Baroness Founder, why has our Prime Minister been so silent?
So I can't ever answer for other people, first and foremost. And I think what I would like all of us to do, and we all have the power to do it, each one of us lives in a constituency with an MP. And therefore, you have the power of the pen to put to your members of parliament why there is silence on this. I will never speak up for somebody else, but all I can tell you is that people like me, wherever we see atrocities against people on human rights, particularly for women and girls in my case, I will raise my voice. And that's not because I have an affiliation, special affiliation with any one of you. I have an affiliation with the world's population on women and girls, women and rights. So that's it. So we have to be quite specific on our asks. And I say to each and every one of you and your friends, get your members of parliament to raise it with the government why there is no comment coming forward at this moment in time. I know my fellow parliamentarians in the House of Lords and in the House of Commons, all of us collectively, when we come back to Parliament, and I've been speaking to the rapporteur here, if there are motions, questions that you wish to have raised, then please utilise those people who already speak up for you, but use your members of Parliament to raise the questions that worry you. Their job is to represent their constituents, and you all belong to a constituency. So that's on that. But, Chair, if I may just talk about the detainees, because I feel that's a really important question. You know, we cannot know what's happening to those detainees. We don't know what's happened to any of the detainees, what conditions they're in, what's happening to them, what rights they have to legal counsel or anything, unless we're able to get the international community to demand, whether it's through the UN or through other institutions, an independent group of people to go and speak to the detainees. Because on your recommendations, it's there. I want to know how we're going to be able to utilize your recommendation, Chair. So I'm sorry I'm putting the question back to the Chair, but I want to know how are we able to know what's happening to the detainees? The recommendation is there. What are the steps the international community needs to take to be able to implement the ability to be able to see what's happening?
Thank you. And Regina, one question from the audience, which was, what are the steps, which is what the Baroness has just asked. But I also want to ask a specific question, which is, it strikes me that the call for an independent mechanism may in fact actually be more a call for universal jurisdiction than it is for an international mechanism. The international mechanism, for those of you who don't know, is mandated to give evidence to the national level when a state opens up a case using universal jurisdiction principles. Then the international mechanism feeds that information to the prosecution at the national level. So aren't we really talking about states strengthening their universal jurisdiction principles and their exercise of them?
Yeah, so to that point, it is, which echoes exactly what's in the findings of the panel. But the difference is the consistency and the quality of the evidence that goes forward in these cases. And it's really important that that is done. The other thing, which we do find in the cases of Burma, is that civil society directly interacts with the mechanism to provide the evidence. So we're not waiting, no matter what, even if it's 5 to 10 years from now and we're waiting for the 160 people that we're saying that are responsible for this. If they never leave the country, if they do leave the country, the evidence is there. It never gets lost. And that's one of the key reasons why this mechanism is important, but it does emphasize the need, and I believe that is going to be the critical solution, is universal jurisdiction. One of the things I wanted to comment on was your question. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. But, you know, when we had the China Tribunal, Mr. Sabi and I, we worked on that as well. And most people, when they heard that there was forced organ harvesting in China, couldn't believe it. There was a 600-page report that was released, and it took civil society and a lot of groups to work together, and that's important because you all have to work together, no matter what whether you all get along or not is irrelevant. You have to work together. But they were able to change laws on organ tourism. They've been able to raise the attention, to get parliamentarians involved, and to bring attention to that, and it's very hard. Now, one of the last remaining challenges they have is what the United Nations can do. And so that goes back to your question, which is, even though the United Nations, of course there are going to be allies for Iran that are sitting there, that goes without saying, everybody's got a friend, but there are also countries like probably in Europe, the United Kingdom and the US and other countries around the world that are going to stand by the requests that Iranian civil society has. And what you have to do is, and I think strategically what's important, is to remind every state of the obligations that they take on. So for instance, it is a UN Sustainable Development Goal, number 16, that calls for the rule of law and justice. The international community is failing if there is no prosecution when things like this happen, and when they don't want to actually address that. The other thing is, recently the UN Security Council, which 2 of Iran's friends, Russia and China, sit on the council, which probably would be a block to a recommendation for the ICC or for the creation of a tribunal, is calling for, and the policy, I think it was a policy, not a resolution, that was put out, for the abstention of permanent members not to use the veto in cases of mass atrocities. And it is up to us to remind them that when they say these things out into the world, that they enforce it. Otherwise, why should we listen to them ever? So I think it's important to remember that in the advocacy.
Thank you. Just one question, because I promised you, and then we'll have to wrap up, unfortunately. Go for it, the lady in the white. The lady in the white, and then I'll call on you. The last 2 questions.
Greetings to you all.
Okay. think number 2, I think. Yeah, go for it.
Just saying hello and thanking you. Hello and greetings to you all. As your colleague mentioned, and unfortunately I forgot their name, who's come from Sweden. 2 days ago, the Islamic Republic of Iran explicitly attacked the station of Kurdish parties, and the result is 17 killed and many injured, and also bombed the school of children. We know that the situation of Iran is killing innocent people, and is also is attacking innocent people, bombing them. Same with shooting kulbars, border couriers, and suhtbars, also border couriers. If the Islamic Republic achieves nuclear weapon, what kind of a tragedy can happen? The EU and other countries that support Iran, how is it that they have continued to insist on JCPOA and the revitalization of it? Isn't it that the time has come that the international community brings peace to Iran and the Middle East and allow them to live calmly? My question is, what is your specific recommendation to see, and so that we can see an end to these systematic atrocities of killing people and repressing people? Maybe some of it you don't even know about yet. Thank you.
Question. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mohammed Amin.
Hello, my name is Mohammad Ali Baluch from Baluchistan. The cruelty that the Islamic Republic of Iran does in Baluchistan, it doesn't do anywhere else. It has kept people there starved. An authority has now raped a 15-year-old girl. These atrocities are of the Islamic Republic. Which kind of a republic is this? We all have women and families in our families. How could we be treated this way? The authorities in Chabahar, Honarak, Dashtiyari, you have to see the atrocities that are being done by the Islamic Republic there. Till when can the people tolerate this? I would like to ask Javed Rahman to please see what you can do about this. They have made us starve, that we have to eat bananas with the peel. What do you believe in? This is not a republic, this is not Islamic, this is an evil regime. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Maybe what I will do is just give each panelist 30 seconds to wrap up. I think where we go from here, and I think that will answer the last 2 comments and queries, I think. So, starting with you, Professor. 30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you. 2 key points from these 2 questions. One, the issue of cool bars, the violations of the rights of the Kurdish people, as well as the Balochi minorities. I have consistently documented the serious gross violations, the discriminations that ethnic and religious minorities have to suffer. So, for example, on the Balochis, if you look at the figures of executions of drug offenders, these are totally disproportionate. Again, the cool bar issues, so many of Kurds are being killed by security forces, and it all amalgamates into an issue of absence of rule of law and accountability. And this is a feature that we have been examining today in the context of protests, in terms of violations of women's rights, in terms of violations of ethnic and minority rights. So I would say that we have to take forward our concerns and we must seek accountability and justice for women, for ethnic minorities, for religious minorities, and for the ordinary people of Iran. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I think most of the things has been said before, and I've been listening into everything that you have been saying. And whilst we have been discussing, I also got a text message that I will be able to negotiate this resolution in the European Parliament next week. And I promise at this meeting that all the inputs that I've got from you, all the voices that have spoken out today, those will also be seen within the resolution next week. We need to do everything we can through sanction, through other actions to end the impunity that exists, that the Islamic regime in Iran right now are having. So I will do my share to ensure that, at least from the side of the European Parliament, there are demands from for actions by the member states and the European Union to take their share of responsibility.
Thank you very much. Baroness?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to put a challenge to everyone in this room. We are civil society, right? We can make change, but not as separate groups. It doesn't matter where atrocity takes place, but as civil societies, we have to come together. And we don't. And I don't know why we don't, but we don't. We need to take some ownership of why we haven't changed anything, because where voices are very disunited. So my challenge to all of you is this: get civil society to come together to demand that international community comes together to demand. Because if we can't demonstrate it, we won't get it. If we can't demonstrate that we can be one global voice in civil society standing up, I don't know how many people you've seen protesting outside. I mean, my friend Mansoura came today to hear what was going to be said here, but she's been out there every day. But how many other civil society groups have you all galvanized? And that's the failing we have. We believe it's in my garden, so it's my problem, but then somebody else's garden isn't my problem. Trust me, if it's your problem today, it's somebody else's problem somewhere else, it means it's our problem. So I'm not going to answer your question because I don't think I have the answer. I think the answer sits with all of us, and we've got to find a way of doing it and forget the different factions, but bring all the things that are common to us to fight together on.
Thank you. Regina?
So to the last two that asked the question, my response is for you to be relentless in raising awareness and to messaging the people. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but you see the rapporteur here, you have a parliamentarian here, and you have the Baroness here. Email them every day if you have to. There's other rapporteurs that focus on racism, that focus on poverty, everything, every issue, sexual violence, and they should have the information at their hands all the time, because the last thing you ever want a parliamentarian or a rapporteur at the UN to say is, I didn't know. Yeah. And you have to be able to do that. All of you have to stand together to do that. So just don't give up. Be relentless in your pursuit of justice.
Well, I think powerful calls to action. So join me in thanking our panel for a really interesting discussion. Thank you.